Okay, welcome to my next video. If you got through the first one and came back for more, you're probably mad. Production quality on the first one was poor. I'm aiming for middling on this one. So fancy new bumper at the beginning, impressive. So what do we want to look at this week? I want to look at a Freedom of Information request that was made of the Office for National Statistics. And the F.O.I. Basically asked how many people died of COVID without any other pre-existing conditions, stroke comorbidities. I find that quite an interesting question, first off, because if you surf the interwebs at all, you will find that the vaccine deniers, anti-maskers, people that think COVID is a pandemic, scandemic, whatever, tend to jump on this information. They want to say, oh, those people were ill anyway. Well, yes, one of the things we know is that COVID does have a very high effect on people that have existing conditions and have comorbidities. So briefly, what did the F.O.I. say? So the F.O.I. Covered very quickly, and this data is available, number of deaths from, I think it's March 2020 up to the third quarter of 2021. So the total number of excess deaths was 127,704. That is the number of deaths over what we would expect taken from a 5-year average. So 5-year average of the number of deaths in the UK and what happened over that in the period that we're looking at. So 127,704. And then to answer the question that was asked, how many of those people died of COVID with no pre-existing conditions or comorbidities, the number they came up for that same period was 17,371. So that gets people very excited, and they jump up and down and say, oh, only 17,000 people died, and you locked us down, and you took away our freedoms. Yeah, but that is to ignore the number of people with comorbidities who died, who wouldn't have died because we got that data from the average number of deaths. Those people most likely would not have died. So what I want to look at is not just that F.O.I. We're not going to dive into the minutiae of the F.O.I., but we're going to look at the way that certain YouTubers, 3 in particular, have reacted to that and what their take on it is. Those 3 YouTubers are Black Belt Barrister, Dr. John Campbell, and our favourite Alex Belfield. So yeah, we'll have a look at how they reacted to it and what they've concluded from it, or not concluded from it in some cases. We're going to start with Black Belt Barrister's view on this, so we'll go there first.
So clearly there is a lot more information in each of these tables here, but I suggest that it is not sufficient just to look at this excess deaths above the 5-year average in England and Wales, but I'm also curious as to why this Freedom of Information request is not being talked about a lot more than it is, because I personally find it very interesting that for 2020, as an example, there were 9,400 deaths, which, although that is a lot in and of itself, the number of people that died solely from COVID is probably significantly fewer than most people think.
Okay, so 2 things there. The number of deaths is probably significantly lower than most people think. So what? That figure of 17,000 X number of people, they are the people that died just of COVID with no recorded pre-existing comorbidities. It's possible that some of those did have issues that hadn't come to light via a doctor, or maybe they were all fit and healthy. It doesn't matter, because the key thing here is that we already know that SARS-CoV-2 affects people who have pre-existing conditions, people who would quite happily continue on with their diabetes or with whatever other condition that they have. But SARS-CoV-2 has finished them off. It has contributed, and in a major way, to their deaths. I don't understand what not sufficient means. Not sufficient for what? To get what kind of information? I mean, this is interesting information because data is interesting. It's great to understand exactly how things have happened and why things have happened, but not to minimize the effect of SARS-CoV-2. It has been a devastating disease for a lot of the world, and depending on which country you come from, whether you're a developed country, a developing nation, or a third world nation, your outcome has been very, very different, both in the spread of the disease and the treatment of the disease, and what that's meant as far as whether you survive or not. The other issue I have with this, and I'm showing this on screen now, is the thumbnail that went along with this video. And the thumbnail is suggestive of, because it says across it, it's suggestive of some kind of cover-up or some kind of information that is not being released to the general public. I disagree. He has said within this that why is nobody talking about it? I would suggest no one's talking about it because this is information that we already have in hand. We already understand that SARS-CoV-2 will have a bad effect on people who have comorbidities. It's not. This isn't the bombshell that I think that it's being made out to be. So yeah, I believe it's old news. I believe the MSM, the mainstream media, have not picked up on it because they've looked at it and said, well, this is the stuff that we've been reporting for over a year now, that we know that people who are already ill are finished off by SARS-CoV-2. So yeah, I don't see the issue in it. Let's move on to the next YouTuber, Dr. John Campbell, whose YouTube videos have gone up quite a lot because he's an educator. He's I believe a doctor of nursing, in that he is qualified to teach nursing, and he does have a PhD, but his PhD isn't as a virologist or anything like that, and that's not to belittle what he does. He presents really well. In a lot of cases, he presents things that are very factual and very interesting. Occasionally, it will have a slant where you say, "Well, what's the actual view on this?" And I think that's what I want to look at.
Office for National Statistics, obviously, it's a couple of weeks behind, but it's not bad. 127,704 excess deaths above the 5-year average. So we have often thought that this is perhaps the most accurate way to look at deaths. Not so much who died from what, when, but how many more people have died than we would expect. The difference being, of course, we've been living through this pandemic.
Okay, so I would tend to agree. This is probably a very good way to look at the deaths that have been caused through the pandemic. I think it, whilst it's not going to be accurate to the person, it's going to give us a very good guide as to what effect the pandemic has had on society and how many people have died because of SARS-CoV-2. So I think that's an excellent way to look at the deaths.
Now, this actually came out last month, and I've just discovered it yesterday. That's why I wanted to bring it to you now. There's been no mention of this whatsoever on mainstream media, at least on the BBC, sort of ITV, Channel 4 in the UK, and I haven't seen anything on the US channels that I follow. So surprising that they haven't picked this up, because it's a huge story.
Okay, a huge story. I'm not sure it's a huge story, and I think if it was a huge story, the mainstream media would have been all over it. I think it actually just presents facts that we already have in evidence. We already know that SARS-CoV-2 affects people with comorbidities in a dramatic and devastating way. This isn't the huge story. I don't think that Dr. Campbell is making it out to be here. However, let's crack on with what he said.
Where COVID-19 is the only attributable cause of death, we see that the rate of death is actually remarkably low. Now, they're still deaths, but it's much lower than we've been thinking, and it's much lower than mainstream media seems to be intimating. It's really quite profound data, this, really. 17,371 deaths where COVID was the only attributable cause.
Okay, I just want to chime in on this a little bit. It's profound data. I'm, again, not sure that this is profound data. I think it's interesting data, but it's just interesting in the fact that we know that 17,000 people didn't have comorbidities and died. Is it a huge story? Again, I would go back to what I said with Black Belt Barrister. This isn't a huge story. These are facts that we already knew. So I don't see why that would be profound. Interesting perhaps, but not profound. We already have a very good guide from the excess number of deaths as to, what effect SARS-CoV-2 has.
As of the end of September, so we're taking this data to the end of the third quarter, end of September. So what we're saying is, as of the end of September, there's 1,731 deaths where COVID was the only attributable cause. Now, what's the official government data saying there? Within 28 days of a positive test, up to the end of September, 137,133 people died. And the difference there is a factor of 7.9. So the official figures were pretty well 8 times higher than those where COVID-19 was the only attributable cause of death.
Okay, this is... I have a problem with the way that Dr. Campbell is phrasing this. For the first thing, both of these sets of data are official sets of data. We knew that 137,000 excess deaths, that's official data, and 17,000 deaths of people with no comorbidity. This is also official data. So he almost sets it up that there's one set of data and another set of data. Actually, those data sets are not the same thing. One of them is excess deaths over what we'd expect over a 5-year average, and the other is the number of people that died of only SARS-CoV-2. I find that problematic because it leaves the listener, the viewer, to infer that there is something going on. And to say that this figure is 8 times more than that figure, actually, it will, and it will be picked up by anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, anti-SARS-CoV-2 people as, look at this, you've lied to us, it's the Illuminati, it's the government control, it's the lizard people. I think that's a little irresponsible in its presentation style.
Now let's just look at the one more piece of information here. This is the excess deaths from cancer.
You what now? Okay, we were talking SARS-CoV-2, we're now on to cancer. Okay, let's see what he says.
Now, this is from Professor Carol Sequoia, who is, is one of the leading oncologists in the world, cancer doctors. He estimates, now he didn't give his working on this, so I would like to see a paper by Professor Sequoia on this, but he's gone public on this. Probably an extra 50,000 deaths from cancer over the past 18 months you otherwise would not have had.
Hold your horses. Okay, this is incredibly problematic, and for a number of reasons. The flash up, this thing, that we put here, and let's be honest. I understand what Dr. Campbell does here. He types up and prints out the information, but what he's got on here is University of Buckingham, former head of cancer program, WHO, probably an extra 50,000 deaths from cancer over the past 18 months you otherwise would not have had. he corrects this in a second, but he's typed this up. First problem, probably. What do we mean probably? That's not data. That's a guess. It's an assertion from Professor Sikora or Sequoia, depending on. I apologise if I've mangled your surname. But probably an extra 50,000 deaths of cancer over the past 18 months. We should be able to measure that. We should be able to measure an increase in over the last 18 months. We should have that data. So there should be no probably about it. That should be exact. It's actually not what Professor Sikora was saying. I looked for some information on this, and again, as Dr. Campbell points out, he's not seen any workings out on this. He's not seen the data. He's not seen a paper. He's not seen a presentation. I trawled through the internet, and when Dr. Campbell says he's gone public on this, I've found a number of articles in the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday and things like that that were opinion pieces and articles without data to back them up. And those figures actually varied massively from somewhere around 30,000. I saw 30,000, 35,000, 50,000. It took me a long time to find the 50,000 one, and 60,000. So these are all huge estimates, but if we're actually increasing, we're using a factor of 2. We're doubling from anywhere from 30,000 to 60,000. I think we have to be very careful. Now, I appreciate what's being said. There are people who have not been able to attend their cancer treatments or have cancer diagnosed. But at the moment, this is assertion. And we really, if we're going to put data with data, we need to see facts and figures. We don't need assertions. We don't need that methodology. We need to see actual facts and figures. Now, the figure that he's put up on screen, 50,000 from cancer over the past 18 months, when you look at that, when you break it down as, when you do your English comprehension, that says that 50,000 people have died over the last 18 months. Dr. Campbell does break this down a bit and says, it might be people that will die in the future because they didn't have cancer treatment, but that's not what he's put on screen. So I do have a problem with that. I think that should be corrected, and I think he should have corrected it when he did his post-production. He should have looked at that and said, no, I need to cut that out, change how I've presented that.
That's a lot of people who have died or will go on to die of cancer. And of course, the delayed diagnosis now, or the delayed diagnosis 6 months or a year ago, could be the death now, next 6 months, next year, 5 years' time, because the cancer wasn't caught at an early stage.
Yeah, again here we're saying coulda, shoulda, woulda. We need good, solid data around this if we're going to analyse this in some scientific way. We've just gone from a set of data provided by the ONS to an assertion provided by a doctor with no data to back it up. Now, I accept that he is a leading oncologist and probably has some idea of what he's talking about, but we don't have any solid data within this presentation, certainly, and none that I've been able to find that actually says, yeah, I should believe the facts and figures that have been presented here.
Really, we have to take into account this disruption, 6 million people waiting for treatment on the NHS at the moment, 50,000 extra cancer deaths over the past 18 months, or 50,000 cancer deaths that were initiated and will come to fruition over the next year or two, but were initiated by delays over the past 18 months, versus the official death figure, 137,000 within 28 days of a test, versus the ones where the only factor on the death certificate is COVID-19, people that died purely of COVID-19, 17,371. Now, I don't want to be disingenuous about this because people always die for a variety of reasons. So someone that's had comorbidities for a long period of time, they'll get an infection like coronavirus infection, and that can be the thing that brings their death on earlier. But as we saw, the average reduction in deaths in men for 2020 was 7 weeks. So and the average age was 82.5. So how much time are we actually talking about here in terms of quality years of life? Probably not that many.
I don't know how you qualify that. The average reduction in lifespan being 7 weeks. Very easy to glibly say, oh well, yeah, 7 weeks, isn't it? But averages are very good at covering up the number of younger people who have died with comorbidities. I feel like this kind of marginalises older people and sets them aside and says, well, you're going to die anyway. You're dying. You just died a few weeks earlier or a few months earlier. 7 weeks is nearly 2 months. Is that what we want? I don't know how you quantify it, and I don't know how you rationalise and say, yeah, it's okay for someone to die earlier, because these are averages, and we do know that a lot of younger people have died with this, and it's easy to hide that data within an average. I'm uncomfortable with the way that this has been presented. Further, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that we can take a set of data that is provided by the ONS, and we're conflating that with an assertion, with something that isn't data, and to say we need to look at these two things together. I don't know what we're supposed to infer from that. I can see that people will take the inference that, oh, it's not worth the measures that we've taken because we've locked down people and taken away their freedoms, just to save a few weeks on someone's life, or to increase the number of cancer deaths. I don't think as a doctor and as a presenter, I don't think that he should have put it over that way. However, let's go on to look at what Mr. Belfield has to say about it. It's always amusing and
We have seen that those who made the rules broke them. We have seen that the figures we were given were not true. In the beginning, people used to get their bananas and antiseptic spray and wipes and wipe them down, mop down their bananas. They used to take their aubergines and put them in the garage for hours so that the sneezes of people in supermarkets would eventually evaporate, and you wouldn't end up dying of eating a low-fat crinkle or a cheesy puff or maybe a ham shank that may be inflected with the vomit of the microbes from the old Kung flu.
Okay, well, typical of Alex. The old Kung flu, the Vinda flu, whatever else he wants to call it. Let's belittle and marginalise this disease that has taken somewhere between 137 and 150,000 people. If you look at the updated figures, we're around to about 150,000 people who have died of this infection. Why you would go down this route, Alex, is a mystery to me, or maybe it's not. I'm left to infer from this that you have a base, and they will keep watching your videos because you say what ties into their confirmation bias. Human nature. This is what we do. Sadly, that might cost lives, and I think it's irresponsible of you, Alex, to continue in this way. But let's see what you've got to say next.
In the beginning, we believed what we were told. In the beginning of the old Kung flu, we believed that death was knocking at our door because we knew no better. Well, now we know a lot. We know an awful lot. And because of that, I'm done.
Fantastic news. Alex is done. Alex Belfield is done. He's never going to put anything out on YouTube again. He is. The number of times he's done, I don't know. So, in the beginning, we believed these things. This is how science works, Alex. As more data comes in, we change the model to make it more accurate. So, yes, we're faced with a pandemic. We will be as cautious as possible and say, this is what we need to do. These are the things you need to do. And that suggestion will change later on as more data comes in and the model becomes more accurate. That is how science works. Science doesn't work by a guy looking down his microscope and saying, oh yeah, that's the coronavirus. This is what you need to do. End of. No more information. No. Science is progressive. As more data comes in, the scientific advice and the model of what we think this pathogen will do changes. That's how science works.
We have seen that the figures we were given were not true. In the beginning, people used to get their bananas and antiseptic spray and wipes and wipe them down, mop down their bananas. They used to take their aubergines and put them in the garage for hours so that the sneezes of people in supermarkets would eventually evaporate and you wouldn't.
Well, goodness. I'm somewhat lost. The guy's a clown.
Nightclubs were unable to open for the longest period and indeed were closed down again by people like Gollum Prickford in Wales over Christmas and New Year for no reason, over a sniff and a cold, effectively. That has been the conclusion of most, if not all, reasonable scientists who, from the very beginning, realised that the Omicrons was not a problem. The only person who seemed to think it was a problem was Neil Ferguson.
Yes, they told us that. They gave us the best information that we possibly could have based on the data that was available at that time. I don't know why an attempt to improve and protect public health is so objectionable to someone like Alex Belfield. However, he has a base, and while they keep watching his videos and clicking on those videos, he keeps earning money.
It's where we need to tell parishioners the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We need to get to the facts, and the facts are that 150,000 people did not die of the old Kung flu. That is what they tell you every day on the BBC. In fact, just yesterday, we brought you the clip that the BBC now are saying that the people who died from Omicrons and Delta and the Vinda flu and the Mandela flu did in fact not die of it.
Okay. Alex goes on to belittle Neil Ferguson and be rude about his genitals and things like that. Here's the thing: when Omicron came across, we knew that it was more transmissible, substantially more transmissible. We had some suggestion that it was also less severe as far as outcome. However, that data was from South Africa, and that data included, you know, apples for apples. South Africa, the areas that this had been identified, a much younger population for a kickoff. Also, a warmer climate. You've got no idea how that transfers into a different country. So it's probably right to be cautious early on until you start to get data coming in so that you can adjust the science to make sure that you understand what's happening. If we had said, oh, right, the South Africans say that Omicron isn't at all severe, let's open everything up, and we found that in our country it was, what would you be saying then? Who would you be criticising then?
So we now know 17,500 people died of this without already having a pre-existing, which is perfectly normal for a flu. That's what happens during a flu season. That was from the beginning of this in 2020 to now.
Okay, this is pretty awful, and I don't know whether this is ignorance on Alex's behalf or whether it's a deliberate attempt to misinterpret the figures. The next clip he plays, and I'm not going to include it, but it's a part from the BBC where it says that 288 people died within 28 days of a positive test for SARS-CoV-2, and that not all of those people would have died of coronavirus. It doesn't give figures, it doesn't give a percentage, it doesn't say it's 2 people or it's 200 people. But the way that Alex interprets this is, we are being told that these people died, but they didn't really die. They did. People within that group will have died because they got SARS-CoV-2. Maybe they had comorbidities, but they died because of SARS-CoV-2 being in their system. I think this is really poor reporting, and the issue I have with it is that Alex has 350,000 followers, maybe more. That his videos are viewed millions of times, and that misrepresenting things in this way actually gives information to people that they think they're safe when they are not. It's his narrative, it's the way he goes with this every time, is that our freedoms have been taken away. For somebody that probably also voted for Brexit and agreed that his freedom of movement should be curtailed. I find this strange, but I believe that this is just a way for him to get more clicks, get more money, probably.
TV, Sky or the BBC. They have chosen to ignore an official F.O.I. We'll bring you more on that in the next video. So I'm done, just to let you know I'm done.
Okay, so what you're saying is that only 17,000 people died of it. This is ridiculous. You don't know how to science, Alex. You are being either stupid or you're being disingenuous. I don't know which it is. I can't work it out. 137,000 people have died because they have a comorbidity and they got coronavirus. You cannot marginalize them. You can't just shove them to one side and say they don't count because they had something else. We already know that as a human race, we get ill and frail with other things, and just to ignore their deaths is vile. The second thing is, this is not a flu. Number one, it's not a flu virus, but number two, if you look at the figures that we're considering, which are excess deaths, the 5 years worth of excess death of average deaths that we used include people who have died with flu. Yes, big boy. You're being foolish. You're being ridiculous. Those people that died in the past with flu probably had comorbidities as well. You cannot equate these two things. You're dangerous, irresponsible, and you're just shilling for the YouTube dollar. Okay, so excellent. Alex is done. Just to let you know, he's done. He won't be repeating any more of these videos. Yes, he will, because that's the kind of person he is. He will put all of this stuff out again and again and again. So, 3 perspectives there. I think each one of them has a problem with them, but mostly because they don't come to a conclusion. If I was to come to a conclusion, I would suggest that this data is interesting, but it's interesting from a scientific point of view. It's interesting because we can see what percentage of the people that died over the average from the last 5 years died only of SARS-CoV-2 and not with pre-existings, but that we can also see that what effect it has to people who have pre-existing illnesses. We had levels of shielding we understood this very early on, where people were shielded because they were more vulnerable. And we understood that they were more vulnerable because they had comorbidities. This shouldn't come as a surprise. I don't think this is revolutionary information. I don't think this is really phenomenal information. And I don't think it points to any kind of government cover-up. I think it tells us exactly what we already knew. And that's why I think the mainstream media, who have been embroiled in this for the last 2 years, haven't necessarily picked up on it, because they're looking at it and saying, this is old news. This isn't interesting to us anymore. It's not worthy of reporting. However, for the people who want to deny the effect that the COVID-19 epidemic has had, then yes, it's something that they can put out there, misrepresent, and run with. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you come back. I hope the production value is slightly better than it has been. So yeah, it was good to see you. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.